Hi, I'm Ben Jack. Welcome to Advanced One Thing, the show where I invite a guest to tell me the one thing they wish they'd known when they first started sharing their faith. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the director of Share Jesus International, Mr. Andy Frost. Andy, how are you?
Hey, mate, great to see you. I'm in South London, doing very well, thank you.
Very good. And as well, if we had an award for the best, most chunky headphones that we've had on the podcast so far, those would win. Those are looking good.
Yeah, they've got my kind of 80s retro headphones, so definitely chunky and yeah.
You could bring some planes in with those. I love it.
Right now, just I'll do some navigation now. There you go. Now,
so good. Andy, why don't you very quickly just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Share Jesus International?
Yeah, I run a charity called Share Jesus International. People say, what do you do? Well, we share Jesus, and we're passionate about helping the church to communicate the Christian faith relevantly and faithfully. Do a whole range of things, from creating resources to running conferences to running events, and just love being a part of what God's doing.
Amazing. And with all of that experience behind you, I'm very interested to hear what is the one thing that you wish you had known when you first started out on your journey of sharing faith with the world around you?
It's something that I kind of knew, but didn't fully kind of comprehend, I guess. It's that it's more than a prayer. That when we ask people to make a response to Christ, we ask them to respond to that moment, to make a prayer, some kind of faith commitment. But it's the whole idea of discipleship. I think in my early years in ministry, I was so focused upon that moment that I really always didn't think through how to actually help nurture someone's faith going forward, actually help them on that journey going forward. So for me, it's been that challenge of how do I make disciples, not just people who say a prayer and move on.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think if there's two criticisms I get about evangelism in general, is that one is too pushy, and you're kind of putting your views on people, and you shouldn't be doing that this day and age. And that tends to come externally from the church, sometimes within the church, but generally comes externally. But the internal challenge, that the criticism that sometimes we get around evangelism, is it's too focused on creating, converts and not disciples. And you're saying that actually, when you started out, you wanted to learn that from day one. That was important for you.
Yeah, I think I'd misunderstood that. I think I'd been so focused on the moment, I hadn't really thought through the implications. I hadn't really thought through how we help people on that journey of faith. And actually, I was almost doing a disservice in some ways by really kind of failing to fully present the wholeness of the gospel.
Yeah, well, talk me through that a little bit more about the wholeness of the gospel.
Well, I think first of all, it's important to know what we mean by a disciple. We often use the term in Christian language, but I found it helpful. The definition very helpful. It's about knowing Jesus, about becoming like Jesus, and about doing the things that Jesus did. And so when we almost have in our head what it looks like, for example, to be created, to be formed, to be made, then it actually helps us understand then what that process can look like. And for me, I've just written recently on a new little resource, looking at 5 hurdles. I think there are 5 hurdles that are specific to our kind of cultural moment. We need to help people on that journey of overcoming if they're truly going to become disciples of Jesus.
What did you turn up? What you were right? What is that resource called, by the way?
It's called From Decision to Disciple. So it's almost that whole journey for when we ask someone to respond to the gospel. How do we help them on that journey of becoming a disciple, of those 3 things of knowing Jesus, of becoming like Jesus, and of actually doing the things that Jesus did?
If people are interested in that resource, then follow the links in the description below. And of course, while you're there, don't forget to click and subscribe so you don't miss any of these conversations. But as you were writing that resource, I imagine you turned up some interesting things along the way. 'Cause you're passionate about sharing Jesus, clearly, but clearly you're also passionate that leads to what it's supposed to lead to, a lifelong relationship with Jesus, as you've just outlined. What were some of the things that you turned up in your research for writing the resource?
There were kind of 5 hurdles that I've kind of come across. The first thing is about actually engaging the Bible, that we need to help people understand that the Bible isn't just a verse from scripture, but actually it's this amazing story that actually we discover our story in. And so for me, it's been a real challenge for how do we help people who are not perhaps used to reading big clunky books, particularly old books from 2,000 years ago. Books have actually got a lot of kind of challenging scripture in as well. How do we help them to begin to navigate this journey of actually engaging with the Bible themselves and discovering more of who God is and who they are called to be? That was the first big hurdle. The second was about, I guess, being in a busy world, is how do we help people to slow down and actually create space to be with God? Actually, we are so distracted in many ways by Netflix and social media and everything that's happening around us. We can actually miss what it is to actually create space to be alone, to be quiet, to connect with God. The third thing was about lifestyle. That actually we are asking people to say yes to Jesus, not just once, but throughout their lives at different points. And it isn't just about going to heaven, but actually surrendering our lives here and now. That whole idea of actually God wants to challenge and change some of our lifestyle choices. Fourthly, it's about loving the church. That actually when you become a Christian, you get this amazing family, the church. but sometimes the church can be a little bit quirky, a little bit weird, and trying to understand how we help people to navigate that. And finally, that actually being a Christian doesn't mean it's always going to be all easy, but there will be challenges, there will be storms, there will be difficulties. But actually, God helps us in that. But actually, navigating that process of being on a journey with God means that even when things are difficult, God is still there and God is still present. So there are the 5 hurdles I kind of dug up in my research.
Wow, super cool. I'll be really excited to hear back from you actually about the response that you get from that as churches start using the resources and some of the gains and successes they see as they start to implement those things. But talking about gains and successes, you equip people for evangelism, encourage the church to think about its personal evangelism and witnessing to the world. So how do you, while you're doing that, make sure that you're constantly encouraging people? We're not just preaching for a decision, it's a decision that leads to discipleship.
I talk a lot when I'm working with churches that looking at the whole kind of process of how you're doing your outreach in your community, that often we might have a kind of proclamation event, which is great, but it's really working out before we even plan the proclamation event. It's first of all, it's actually what is God already doing? Who's God already put on your heart? Who are you already connected with in the community? And from there, what is going to be the best way to help them on that journey of discipleship? So almost that proclamation piece comes when you've worked out how you're best going to help them journey forwards. Because the danger is that I've seen before, we ran a mission a number of years ago, and we had about 60 kids respond to the gospel at a skateboarding competition. It was a fantastic event.
Wow.
We had skates and DJs and everything else. And after the event, we gave these 60 kind of forms to the church. Here you are, 60 young people who want to connect to the church. A year on, I went back and said, how's it all going? And, well, actually, we still got the forms here, but we haven't done anything with them yet. Wow. I said, well, how come? I was like, well, we just didn't really expect God to do anything, and we didn't know what to do, so we just didn't do anything. We've still got their addresses. And it's like, it's a year's gone by. You've missed the opportunity in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so for me, we can be so focused on the event or on the proclamation that we actually miss what are the next steps, what are the journey. And the challenge is that actually, if we want to help people become disciples of Jesus, then it takes an investment of our time and our prayer life. It isn't just a one-hit wonder, but it's actually saying, are we willing to structure our programs, our church life, our personal lives around helping people on that journey of faith? And almost if you're not going to do that, then actually, no matter what you do proclamation-wise, it's almost, it's frustrating.
Yeah, it can be frustrating. And it's the challenging thing of where you see a desire for mission and outreach, and you see a desire for people to come into the church, but that's not always matched with the desire to accommodate then those who come in and think about the fact that we might not just be able to do exactly what we've been doing before. How much responsibility do people like yourself and me, who are, obviously in the church, part of the church, but also working on behalf of it, perhaps ecumenically across different denominations and things, to support the church in its evangelistic outreach and training? How much responsibility do people like you and me need to take for our role in actually creating a bit of a false thinking around what the outcome of our evangelism actually is? Yeah,
I think that's what I've been wrestling with really, with this resource. And kind of back when I first began doing ministry, I think just that importance of helping churches think through, are you really serious about making disciples? And if you are, what are you willing to give, and what's the cost you're willing to make? And that I get invited to go and speak at some events, and you go to some events and they promise you a year out there'll be loads of non-Christians there, and then you kind of finally get to the event and they go, actually, everyone here is already a Christian, because they haven't done the groundwork relationally beforehand. Right. But other events, you see there's a response made, but they've got no idea what's the next step. So I think as a trainer and helping churches think through this stuff, we have to work out, what does a disciple look like in your context, and what are you going to resource to make that happen, really? And so for me, it's about helping them to think through that process, to think through the implications, and to make that necessary investment of time, energy, and thought into the process going forwards.
Yeah, something we talk a lot about in Advance is, particularly for evangelists, the dual responsibility of loving into the world, but also loving into the church. And again, trying to make it clear that we don't want evangelists to think of themselves as being completely separate, peripheral to the church. No, but that's actually where some of the problems come. No, we're part of the body, but we also have a key role within the body to stir and equip the saints for works of service. But because we're quite activisty, and there's all sorts of different people involved in Advance, not just evangelists, but those who are kind of evangelists by calling and gifting, and are always thinking, I've got to go out of the church, I've got to go and preach the gospel, and we forget that we have this responsibility to actually love the church really well. And one of the best ways that we can love the church is to constantly remind them of the need for discipleship as the end game. And it's not even the end game, it's just the ongoing game of evangelism.
Yeah, so true. And I think that's a really helpful thing to think about, is actually, as the evangelists, we are called there to reach out and to mobilize the church, but also we have to understand that there are the kind of internal things of church life. We have to help work through what it looks like. So again, for me, it's being part of many churches over the years and running churches, that it's how we welcome people in. It's how we help people join small groups. It's how we help people understand the idea of tithing and giving, all these kind of things. We have such a church culture in many ways where you fail to really break down and how new people discover what it really means to be a follower of Jesus.
Yeah, and we've probably all had experience in our lives, I would imagine, of taking somebody, a friend or a family member or something, into a world, or introducing them to something that we're familiar with that they're not. And how do we go about doing that? Perhaps, you know, if you've got kids, your kids try to introduce you to the world of gaming or TikTok or whatever it might be. Or if you are particularly, you start, dating someone and you want to expose them to some of the things that you like, and they have no, I remember taking an American friend once to watch cricket. And, that was a crazy experience. They didn't understand any of it, and we had to explain everything. And, by the end of one cricket match, they weren't totally on board, but at least they understood a little bit more of how the game worked, and they had a bigger appreciation for it. And I think we're used to doing that in other parts of our lives quite naturally, because we have a desire to draw people into things that we care about. It's interesting to me that there can be a bit of a disconnect then to do that in our church community.
Yeah, I think we often forget just the knowledge and the understanding we've picked up over the last number of years being in church and the church world, really. So even the Bible, it's such a complex book, but we begin to understand how it all fits together. So when someone's new, we almost forget all that kind of background what we've done. And for me, I guess discipleship is about two things. It's about being intentional and about being relational. And I guess that at times we can be very relational with people and lose that sense of intentionality, or we can be very intentional and lose a sense of relationality. And it's having both ends. So it's being present, being with people relationally, exploring life with them, but at the same time being intentional, helping them to actually overcome these hurdles as I've described in the booklet. Because I think for me, they can be overcome. We've just got to do the hard work and think through how do we help people to navigate these different hurdles.
Brilliant. Andy, thanks so much. If you want to connect with Andy in any way, shape or form, get hold of his resources, things like that, check out Share Jesus International. We will post the links in the description below. Don't forget, of course, to leave a like on this video. That helps more and more people to see what's going on. I see Andy is smiling there as I say that. Andy, I've been told I have to say these things. You've got to apparently,
there you
this
go,
is
mate.
what they do.
You're nailing it, mate.
Thank you. We will, of course, be back next time. But the one thing that Andy Frost wishes that he'd known when he first started sharing the gospel is that prayer is not the end. The decision is not the end. It's the discipleship that we help to lead people into from there. We will see you next time.